So I introduced myself in the chat, but for those who missed it, I am Laura. I'm one of the founders of Goodfest, and I also work for Cultivator, which is a business support and skills development program in Cornwall, supported by European Social Fund, Cornwall Council and the Arts Council. And basically we've been working since 2017 with a whole wide range of amazing creative people, everybody from startups, freelancers, big businesses. And what's great is we get to have bespoke conversations with them about their business and what their aims are, and quite often those come up with sustainability. So one of the things we wanted to do today was just share some of those stories. And as Mark said at the beginning, you know, things do happen at the edges. I think there's a slightly different spirit in Cornwall, that ability to push and challenge and be different and not worry about having to fit in with everybody else, which is really helpful. At Cultivator, which is part of Creative Kerner, it's part of like a bigger network of creative people right across the sector. We have been working on this thing called Clash, which is our climate and sustainability hive, and that's all about bringing voices together, challenging the norm, supporting each other. And so what we're doing now is just a little flavour of that, really. So I'm not going to talk much longer. I'm going to ask Sam to kick off, and everybody's just going to give a really short lightning talk, and we'll just rattle through those, and then you'll get to meet them later on, I'm sure, in other forum. Off you go, Sam. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Sam and I am a Cultivator client, and I run a company called Boost Innovations. And Boost is a design and innovation company that focuses on women and product design. And specifically at the moment, we make boobs for ladies who've had breast cancer. So some of you might have remembered me from Goodfest when we met in person. We did do the thing on the beach, and it was really lovely. And I had a bag of boobs with me, and I was like merrily showing them around, but I get to show you online now, so it's fine. So standard industry prostheses look a bit like this. If you have breast cancer, you've had your boob removed, you might get something that looks like this, and we've redesigned it because amongst the poor functionality of a product like this, which makes women hot and sweaty and it's not very comfortable to wear, it's also not very sustainable. So it needs to sit in a plastic cradle, a bit like this, and it's made from sort of complex materials. You can't recycle it. It's basically impossible. If you get any damage to it, you have to throw them out and start again. And they're not very diverse either. There's kind of like 3 colors of them, and they don't really represent people's skin color, and they don't represent personalities, and they're just not very nice. So Boost is a company, we started with that. We do other product design, human-centered design stuff, but that's where we started, and we developed the Boost breast form, which can be packaged in a more eco packaging, and we have redesigned what that looks like. So it's like this, it's lighter, it's airier, it's more suitable for active wear. Our customers are really enjoying wearing them. There's a different relationship there, it's more empowering, but also it's made from one material, it's 100% recyclable, so we can rechip it and we can reuse that material. So I was asked to talk about our sustainable principles and why they're important. So basically, one of the things that happened when we were going through the co-design process was we were thinking from day one about how we could design products that met these women's needs, that were more sustainable if we possibly could. And we knew we had to use this medical grade silicone, which in itself is not a really nice and friendly product. So what we looked at is the way that we were manufacturing to make sure that we were saving all our production waste. This is what our production waste looks like from the injection molding points, and the ways that we could rechip and reprocess that, and perhaps look at making other boobs from boob waste, which is one of the things we were doing, and other different products using the rechipped silicone. I'm sorry, my presentation is a bit more of a show and tell kind of thing. So we went through that, and none of our competitors were really doing that, and we wanted to really embed those things in the way that we approach production. So our principles really were to do as much as we could from day one to make sure that our whole setup was really really consciously thinking about our impact. So that's our social impact, our impact on the diversity of our customers, and the impact that we have on the world around us and the environment. We were asked in the pre-questions to think about one thing that our subsector and the creative industries could do to create a step change in sustainability. And for me, as a product designer, as somebody who's kind of working in that space with co-design and manufacturing, we decided to manufacture our products ourselves in what we called a production pod system, specifically so we could keep an eye on the impact that we were having on other people and the environment and what we were doing. And that was a really brave and courageous decision for us, and we stuck to it, and we're really glad we're still sticking to it, despite the fact that everybody else in the whole world ever tells us that we should be using big production processes, we should be doing this, that and the other, we should be doing injection molding, we should be doing blah 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 blah. And actually we had to be really firm with people. This is what we're doing, this is the way we're doing it, and this is why, because these things are really, really important to us. And yes, it means the cost of the product is slightly more, and yes, it means that, you know, a wholesale price is slightly different, but actually we're not going to ship it out to China and just get things mass produced, because we can't control the environmental impact and the sustainability. We can't look at the scaling up processes, and we can't be agile to meet the needs of the women that are talking to us. So there were business decisions behind the way we were doing things, and we went through a phase of being constantly told that we were probably wrong and having to prove people otherwise. And I think that being brave, having the courage of your convictions, is one of the things that I would like to see supported in the Creative Sustainable Manifesto, because I think that having the infrastructure around you to be okay to do that. Yes, we've made mistakes, we've learned a lot, we don't know everything, we still don't know everything, but we know that where we're aiming for, and we're brave enough to stay on that path and to keep that goal in sight. So I think for me, that's the most important thing about what we're doing, making steps towards sustainability.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Sam. Right, in lightning speed, we're going to move on to Nick. Nick, are you ready? He is ready. He's got his green background.
I'm ready. I got my green background. Am I ready to share screens?
Feel free. It should work. Let's hope.
Hopefully.
There we go.
Cool. Okie dokie. Yeah, I am Nick. I work at Leap. Hold on. Let me just. There we go. I work at Leap as a sort of senior sustainable web developer. That basically means I spend my days sort of doing a lot of front-end web development, WordPress, you might have heard of it. But I also do a lot of writing and a lot of blogging sort of externally to that as well, specifically around sustainable web development. Rattling through sort of, the internet is a massive sort of very carbon hungry entity. If it was a country, it would now be the 7th largest polluter in terms of its sort of CO2 sort of emissions, and that's only getting worse. You know, that's definitely not a good thing. Our key principle in Leap, in terms of our sort of digital side of things, which is sort of obviously the side that I'm a part of, is kind of less is more. The less that you can sort of put out there in terms of your actual sort of website weight, how much it needs to sort of be sort of downloading for people and that sort of thing, the better it's going to be in terms of its sustainability. So the less weight it has, the less carbon it's going to be producing, or less energy it's going to be using. So what else and why do sustainable sort of websites matter? Well, website transfer size, so that's sort of like when you visit a website, it's going to be downloading all of that stuff that's on that website so you can see it. That transfer size has grown by 60% since 2016, and it's still growing. People are producing larger, heavier websites, and it's not good. Internet connected devices, so that can be anything from a laptop like I'm using here, or your phone, your smartwatch, anything like that that's actually connected to the internet. It's predicted that it could be using around 14% of global electricity by 2040. At the moment, I think it's probably around 4%, give or take, but it's predicted obviously that it's just going to keep growing and growing. And 14% of the whole globe's electricity is a massive, it's a gargantuan amount. the average web page at the moment produces 1.76 grams of CO2 every time somebody goes to view that page. So for a website with 10,000 monthly page views, which for quite a lot of websites is fairly average, it could be around 211 kilograms of CO2 per year that it's producing. Extrapolate that out to, you know, the massive sort of Facebooks and your other social medias and stuff like that. The amount of carbon that they could be producing could be enormous, you know, tons, many, many tons. So what are we doing? So in the digital side of Leap, obviously, as I mentioned, sort of less is more, but also we run everything that we do digitally via green hosting. Everything runs on renewable energy and is carbon neutral. That's probably the biggest change that if you yourself run a website, if you have a website for your business, that's probably the biggest change that you can make to make the largest impact as sort of one thing, one sort of key principle that you can take. There's lots of other things though. Optimizing your images is a massive one. It can be a little bit tricky. So working with a sort of web developer or, you know, somebody you know that obviously knows websites perhaps more than you do to help you do that is a major thing. Instead of uploading images directly from your sort of big digital camera that are sort of 10 megabytes or more in size, you need to be sort of optimizing those images, making them the correct size that they're going to be seen on the web, but also optimizing the actual file itself so that it can be as small as it possibly can be. Reducing video usage is also a major one. Video, much like we're doing here, costs a lot of carbon. And lazy loading all of those images and iframes, such as iframes might be from YouTube, for example. Those are sort of some big major things that you can do to help sort of reduce the impact of your website or websites that you might be running.
Thank you.
And that, quickly, is it.
I'm impressed with your lightning speed. Thank you so much. I am going to move quickly on to Denzil. Please say hello.
Hello. Thanks for inviting us to talk on this. I don't have a presentation. I might or might not have some props depending on where my meandering talk goes. I'll try to keep it quick. So my name's Denzil Monk. I run a independent production company based in Penzance called Bosena, and it's always been important to me in everything I've done to think about the impact on people and planet. In the past, I've set up and run social enterprises, and when I came to set up this company, I've considered whether social enterprise was the right way to go, whether to set up a CIC, and ended up setting up as a limited company because in the film industry, it's a more investable corporate structure, and there's a whole other talk we could have around corporate structures and what works, but it kind of the fundamental kind of conclusion that I came to was that what matters is not what the corporate structure is, but how I run the business and what the impact of the decisions I make are. So informing that, we heard from Dewey earlier, talked, hopefully everyone was here earlier for her talk, a lot about the donut economic model, and Kate Raworth's work on that. That's a model that I've kind of explored and worked with and looked at how to apply that in my industry, in film production and screen production, and taking those kind of principles, the social foundation and ecological ceiling, or with the Maori flip on that, ecology foundation and a social ceiling, and it's an interesting sort of flip there, is kind of just thinking about what all of those decisions are, whether that comes to, you know, how you employ people. When I'm working on a film production, suddenly there's this huge burst of people coming, like who they are, how conscious they are of all the things that they're doing matters, and I have some control over that. And there's a lot of stuff in production that I don't have control over. So we shot a feature film earlier this year, and by way of example, one of the things was how do we power it? You know, we're kind of out in fields and cliff tops, and we need electricity to power lights and things like that. So the first thing is what do we actually need to minimizing the amount of power usage that's needed, and then the second thing is what is available on the supply chain. And usually people use petrol generators, which obviously are polluting and not good. There are some rechargeable battery generators, which there's a company in Bristol called EcoShoots who started sort of helping this part of the supply chain by looking for solutions for things. So we managed to get hold of one of those, which was great, but it's a big heavy beast, and we ended up having to get a gator, a little diesel powered vehicle to carry this electric generator that was being recharged with solar panels at the accommodation the gaffer was staying at. So there are all these kind of conflicts that, you know, you try to make the right decisions, but because you work in an ecology where there are lots of different things, then those decisions can have small impacts. And I think you know, sort of people said earlier, every person that does something that's good, every small change matters and makes difference. But the trouble with the challenge that we've got is that despite all of those small changes and despite all of those positive actions, actually what's really required, if we're not to completely fuck up the planet that we're living on, is radical change. And radical change now, not just a little bit of kind of making things a little bit better incrementally and making the little things that we're doing, magnifying those into, oh, aren't we doing well, patting ourselves on the back. So I think this is a massive challenge for in our industry. There are some good things happening. There's the Albert carbon footprint calculator, which is now a requirement for UK productions or publicly funded UK productions. That means that people are being more conscious about the decisions that they're making and are reporting, which is important on that. But it's just about carbon neutrality. And again, it's working towards an idea of net zero by buying out whatever pollution you create. So it's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. And the industry, the kind of BFI's published some reports recently on the sort of the strategic developments in the industry, the sort of plans to make things better. And again, there's some good things in there. Sky's just built the most sustainable studio in Europe recently, and that's great. That's a good example of things getting better. But the idea that somehow that's going to trickle down and that studio production is going to trickle down and suddenly everything's going to get better, maybe in 100 years, but we haven't got 100 years. So for me, the challenge for me running my little independent production business is, what can I do within the power that I have, within the resources that I've got? You know, I can be a living wage employer, I can have a green energy supplier, I can get battery generators rather than petrol generations, I can make sure that our catering is vegan, I can try to find accommodation and transport that is within what is available as sustainable as possible. There are compromises all the way with these things, but they are moving in the right direction. So what we're trying to do, the sort of main focus that I've got at the moment, is trying to establish a set of sustainable principles as we bring projects in. So right from the very early stage of deciding you know, what project to work on, they might have a sort of 3, 4, 5 year cycle from early development through script development through to production to a film actually being out there, is to have a set of production principles and to establish those with the writer and director and with the and as we bring heads of department in, to be talking to them about those things and making sure that we're building teams of people who care deeply about their impact, and to the extent that we can, as we crew up and as we kind of bring people into a production, to make sure that that individual responsibility is there. Because you can have systems set up, if people don't use them, if people don't apply that thinking in their own lives, then it's limiting what the impact can be. So we're trying to create a model of, and I am going to use this word, although it was spoken about earlier, to use this word with caution. I am using it very consciously with caution. We are working towards building a regenerative filmmaking practices. That is our intention, that's our aim, and that's what we're trying to do. And we kind of talk about having an ecosophy, an ecosophical approach to film production. Ecosophy is it's my favorite word, actually. I've got 2 favorite words, ecosophy and mycelium. The 2 together solve everything. So ecosophy is a phrase that was coined by Arne Næss, in one of the founders of the deep ecology movement. Really, it's about just having a personal philosophy about your impact, about the ecology that you communicate with, that you have impacts on and that has impacts on you. So as well as applying that in my own life, trying to apply that to the business and build this evolving ecosophical kind of set of principles about how we do business. And our big challenge is, as we go from smaller scale production into larger projects and larger scale production, which might have, you know, hundreds of people working on it, and you know, massive kind of set builds and things for period dramas, things like that. How do we take those principles and really, you know, not compromise on those principles? How do we take that through and work with the entire life cycle? And the best thing that well, the thing that makes me hopeful is that I keep coming across individuals who are doing that in their own. So I just came across a costume designer who is working on that kind of cyclical principle, on that virtuous circle with their own work, whatever they end up doing, and also sharing their ideas more widely within their bit of the industry. So trying to find those people is
I like it that you've ended on a hopeful note as well. I wasn't sure where you were going with it, but it ended hopefully. I love that.
Always hopeful.
Stephen, over to you. Oh, you're on mute still. Sorry, somebody had to do it, and I'm afraid it's you.
It's okay. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I'm Stephen Tozer. I went back to university when I turned 40 to study interior design. And then after graduating in 2018, I set up my own interior design studio, which is Boaz Studio. And then kind of a year later, I brought on Alice Nightingale, who's a fellow graduate as well. And we both, the reason we both worked so well together is because we had a very similar sustainable ethos running through the course. And when we graduated, we wanted to use this to kind of work together. The reason why it's so important within interior design is because interior design almost follows a similar model to that of fast fashion. So every interiors magazine is always saying what the new color is of the season, or, you know, the must-have rug, and all these kind of things, which just creates this churn of, you know, elements that are potentially going to end up in landfill. So that's what we want to try and break with what we're doing. I've got a slide.
Hopefully you'll be able to share it.
I shall try.
If not, I shall message the clever techie people. You've done it. Right? Yes, do it.
Okay. Is that, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see it. It's not quite full stream, but I think we can read it. Crack on. Okay.
Basically, I just wanted to show this. It's a project we're working on in St Austell at the moment. It helps to highlight what our sustainability strategy is. So we focus on the adaptive reuse of buildings. So we really want to try and bring buildings that aren't being used back into the local community, you know, get them to become hives of activity again. We want to work with local suppliers, local craftspeople, local materials. Obviously that's great for carbon footprint, but it also helps bring money into the local economy. And it also means that those people who are working on it are invested in that project that you're working on. So, and they'll know other people. So straight away, it sort of lends itself to this project becoming a success, which will help with its longevity. Another thing we look at is the material life cycle. So where have things come from? Where are they going to end up? So with this cafe, for example, when we're looking at the countertop, it's like, okay, so if this cafe is sold in the future and somebody takes it over, doesn't like the countertop, what is going to happen to that countertop? So we need to know that it's reusable, recyclable, biodegradable. You know, we need to think about the life cycle of the materials that we're putting in. We also try and reuse and reclaim wherever possible. So with older buildings like this one, we're using floorboards to make furniture and screens and things that are being taken up. And so we'll look at what we can use within the space that's existing, so it's not going to landfill. Education. So one thing we have to do ongoing is educate our clients. Quite often with sustainable materials, there's a higher price included. So we have to, you know, educate the clients in terms of why that product is a lot better than maybe the alternatives, and what the impact would be on the planet. And then also we're always continuing to educate ourselves through courses, through reading, through research, and that kind of thing. And then sort of the last of our sort of evolving sustainability strategy is longevity. So we want to make spaces that will last the test of time. So we sort of look at sick building syndrome and making sure that these are nice spaces to be in, that people don't feel that they're not space that you don't want to go into. So looking at biophilic design and things like that, looking at improving the air quality, lighting, ventilation, and just trying to create like human connectivity to the outside environment and that kind of thing as well. So that's sort of our sustainability strategy. We were also asked to look at what our key sustainable principle would be that over everything else. And we would come back to that, the local trades, local craftspeople, local suppliers. You know, it really just helps embed our projects within that local community. For this project here, we did a brick workshop with the children within the community last weekend. And so they'll be able to come in and see the bricks that they've made within this space, which then, you know, brings in their parents, brings in their grandparents, because they all want to see these bricks. And it's just really nice at embedding that within the community. And then lastly, it was what simple thing would you like to see others in your sector adopt to make more of a collective difference? So the key issue we have is lack of transparency with products that we're purchasing. So there's so much greenwashing that if you scratch below the surface, actually you find that the eco wool insulation that you wanted to use, sound insulation, is actually the wool sourced in New Zealand. It's made in China, it's then shipped back to New Zealand, and then it's sent over to the UK. But none of that is on the website. All of the lovely fields and things are on the website. There's a UK office, so it looks like it's made in the UK, but a phone call to them sort of makes you realize it's not made in the UK. It's, you know, sourced in one country, made in another, shipped back to the country source, and then shipped over here. So is that sustainable? And so there's all these kind of questions that come up as we're kind of going through. So I think kind of for us, some kind of a, you know, accreditation that we know is reliable for us would just be the key thing that we would want to sort of make a difference.
Amazing, thank you so much. It's really, really interesting. I'd love to hear more about your projects, but we haven't got time today. Helen, please, sorry to leave you last, but Helen, please go for it, and thanks for wrapping it up.
My pleasure. I'm going to screen share. So before I came back to Cornwall to study illustration 4 years ago, I worked with lots of brilliant people. Oh, it seems to be moving on its own. I worked with lots of brilliant people on quite tricky challenges in various parts of the world. So things like how to reduce children dying of diarrhea in slums in India through hygiene habits, how to create conversation around domestic abuse in South Africa, that breaks unhelpful taboos, questions like how to encourage investment in new technologies for toilets, for example, in East Africa. So important issues. And then I came back to study illustration, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to do something useful and good? And I guess this question kind of drove me to think about what to do. The first thing I did was I set up a community drawing event called Street Draw 24 in Falmouth. It's really simple. It's a 24-hour drawing event. All the images go into an exhibition. They get sold. We raise awareness and funds for St. Petrock's work with people facing homelessness. We're on our fourth one. We've probably raised about 15 grand so far over the 4 years. But it also encourages people to look at where they live in a different way, which I think is one of the really powerful things that the arts do. This led to me also using my illustration skills at St. Petrock's, where I did a reportage project and I created an illustrated report for them. I used to be a researcher, qualitative researcher, so brought those two together and gave them feedback on their winter service, and also created a book that talked about what their winter service is and what it means for their clients and also for their staff. This then led to working with the Eden Project. So I spoke at the sleep out that they have each year, again to raise funds, this time for the Eden Project and the Amber Foundation. And also in a very fun way, got to draw all night to raise the profile of the event. So again, just using what I have to do something, however small. Alongside this, I was asking myself, I was still studying, and I was asking myself the question about the role that arts can play in social change. So I didn't know. I really felt like I genuinely didn't know. So I got some smart people, including Amanda Brookman, who I know was mentioned earlier in our breakout, to help me answer it. And we had a panel discussion in Falmouth in the days where having a packed auditorium felt like a good thing. And we discussed what the role of the arts was in social change. As it was, COVID was waiting in the wings, and 6-7 months later, I went back to those people and interviewed them again, interviewed some of the people in the audience. We had a really great audience with people like Nicholas Sorota in it, and asking the same question again, created an article which went online, and then I also created this pamphlet which I illustrated. And I'm in the process of kind of sending it out to people to have conversations around the role of the arts in the context of COVID and more generally. Another way of thinking about, using what you're good, it was mentioned earlier by Natalie, which is the idea of your network. And I guess thinking about what your platform is to do something useful or good, your network is also part of that. So this is Professor Miriam Sidibe, who wrote a book after spending 12 years at Unilever, working with a Lifebuoy soap brand, which is a very well-known brand with a huge social mission. She wrote this book at Harvard, and because I've worked with her and I know her, I harangued her into letting me illustrate it, which was fantastic because for me, it's a very worthwhile book. And she's really, kind of used it as a kind of platform for her and the work that she does with really interesting businesses around the world. So again, a very small way to do something that I think is useful and sort of on brand for me. I'm currently exploring, when I came back to Cornwall, I was quite shocked after 30 years away to find that the same sorts of issues prevailed, particularly social inequality, which was definitely on the cards when I was growing up, and it's kind of worse, I would say, now than before. So with my partner, who's a product designer, we have a brand called Discover. It's in its very early stages, but the whole idea of the brand is to have a conversation around the realities of Cornwall as opposed to rural stereotyping and what the marketing tourism industry likes to say about this place. To do it in a playful way, to make money through, oh, that's my alarm going off. That tells me to stop. To do it in a kind of playful way, but also to use the power of a brand to, again, see if there's something good we can do with what we're good at. Thank you.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much, guys. I hope everybody has got something out of that whistle stop tour. I'm completely blown away by the diversity and brilliance of what you're all doing individually. And I hope people feel encouraged that, whatever your practice, whatever your size or scale, or however long you've been going, your approach to your work and your life can make a difference. So thank you so much to those lovely Cultivator clients. And I would now like to sort of flip over to Matt, who's going to really get us into the meat of the day about why we need